The humanitarian aid that was expected to start arriving in Gaza today has been delayed. Officials from Egypt, Israel, the United States, and the United Nations have been trying to work out issues with the shipments, including inspecting them for weapons. Speaking at the Rafah border crossing today, the UN Secretary General stressed the need for the trucks to move into Gaza as quickly as possible.
Repeatedly said that the barbaric attack by Hamas need to be condemned, but I've also said they cannot be a pretext for a collective punishment of the Palestinian people. It's absolutely essential to respect international humanitarian law, it's absolutely essential to protect civilians, and it's absolutely essential to make humanitarian aid come to the Palestinians in need.
Two of the trucks waiting at the border are from Save the Children, an organization that's been helping Palestinian children since the 1950s. President and CEO of Save the Children Canada, Danny Glenwright, joins me now from Toronto. Danny Glenwright, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
The deal was for 20 trucks to get in, which is not a lot when you consider the need, but it's better than zero. So what are you hearing from people in Gaza right now about what the situation is looking like?
David, it's nothing short of a humanitarian catastrophe right now, which is why we're trying to put on so much pressure for a ceasefire. We're speaking to our colleagues in Gaza daily, and the situation has gotten worse and worse all the time. At the moment, there are 1 million children on the brink of a serious crisis, hanging by a thread. We know that a child is dying right now in Gaza every 15 minutes. And we're speaking to our staff there, and 5 of them have had their homes destroyed. One of them has moved with the mass exodus of people from North Gaza to South Gaza and is in a shelter meant for 300 people that's now supporting 25,000 people, which is the population of Whitehorse. Imagine that population in a room the size of a banquet hall. And these people have been for almost 2 weeks now without any access to humanitarian assistance. And before this latest escalation of hostilities, the population of Gaza relied on 100 trucks coming in every day of humanitarian assistance. So we're talking about a severe humanitarian crisis. You know, I was speaking to my colleagues today, and all of us said, none of us remember a moment where we've heard reports of doctors having to operate on people without anesthesia in any crisis in which we've worked. And that's the situation right now. There's no electricity, there's no fuel, there's no food, there's no clean water. It's a disaster.
I remember seeing reports of doctors doing surgeries without anesthetic in Haiti after the earthquake because the need was so urgent and the crisis was so severe. And I remember my colleague Paul Hunter, who has been in Israel, reporting on that from Haiti. And it's a similar situation as you speak of. And you mentioned one child every 15 minutes. And that is such a massive proportion of the population inside Gaza, because half the population is under the age of 18. So how is this crisis specifically affecting young people and children?
Well, and that's who we are thinking about right now and always. And the population of Gaza, every child there has spent their entire childhood living under a 16-year blockade. So a situation of a humanitarian emergency has been the only reality they've ever known. Before this crisis, we spoke to children in Gaza, and 3 out of 4 children there had no hope for the future. So we're dealing with right now a population where that was the situation a few weeks ago. You can imagine the psychosocial effects on these children right now. Unfortunately, a large part of my job is being in places where I have to look into the eyes of children who are terrified, and it never gets any easier. And it's keeping me awake right now, thinking about all these children in Gaza who are sheltering in parking lots, in centers with 25,000 people, without anywhere to use the bathroom, without any food, with aerial bombardments going on constantly. And I can't imagine the long-term effects that that's going to have on those children. And that's really what worries us at Save the Children.
So after the president's visit was announced to Israel and the Secretary of State Blinken announced that there was an agreement with Israel to facilitate humanitarian aid, I would imagine that gave a sense of hope to some degree, but also there's a sense of urgency and the obvious need. And now these delays. I mean, what is the impact of this delay and the uncertainty about whether any kind of aid is going to be able to get in there now because of the security challenges?
Well, quite frankly, the impact is more lives are being lost. And that's what's happening right now. And opening a humanitarian corridor is one thing, but what we need and what we're calling for, and Save the Children has joined 400 organizations around the globe, from every corner of the globe, calling for a ceasefire, because getting aid in is one thing, but we need safety to be able to deliver it. And right now, there is no safe place in Gaza. So we can't be asking people to come and collect aid from us when there are still bombardments happening overhead. So the corridor is one thing, but what we really need is a ceasefire. And what we need here in Canada is a diplomatic partner to be pushing for that, because that's critical right now. Until the bombardments stop, until there's a cessation of hostilities, we won't actually be able to deliver that aid. So yes, we're hopeful. We've got our truck there. It's ready to go. But 20 trucks, it's a drop in the bucket. And what's happening in Gaza right now is an extreme situation. So we continue to be worried, and we continue to wait for that partnership. There's only so much we can do as humanitarian agencies.
We had news today that 33 members of Parliament have signed a letter to the Prime Minister asking Canada to join the calls for that ceasefire. But you've seen it. There's very little appetite for that, it seems, from Israel and certainly from the United States. It was a week ago today that the U.S. at the White House, they were asked about it, and the spokesperson for the president called the idea disgusting because they believe in Israel's right for self-defense. And the argument is that Hamas can resupply and it would benefit from a ceasefire. How hopeful are you, given that state of play and those positions that have been expressed, that you can get what you need to get the aid in?
You know, I ask world leaders, I ask the Prime Minister to think about the fact that 1 million children are right now hanging by a thread on the brink of a serious catastrophe with no aid, no food, no clean water. And that's what we are thinking about at Save the Children. And the only way to do anything about that is a ceasefire. And I think that until they are considering that option, it's an increasingly tragic situation. And we've joined many other humanitarian organizations and other agencies signing letters ourselves. We're doing all kinds of advocacy behind the scenes publicly to raise awareness about these children, because a million children, that's more than the population of Ottawa. This is a huge catastrophe. And it's disproportionate to think that these children who had no role in this crisis are suffering in this way. And I think that, not allowing aid to those children is against international humanitarian law, to civilians and children. And that's what we are calling for right now, is a humanitarian corridor, a ceasefire. We need to get in there and provide medical supplies, hygiene kits, clean water, food to these children, or they'll be suffering further. And I'm thinking about children as well, trapped under the rubble of these buildings where there's no one in there to support them, to help dig them out. It's horrifying all around. And I understand it's complicated, but at Save the Children, we're driven by one imperative, and that's that children, no matter where they are, deserve the right to be protected. No. And right now, those children need that.
Yeah, and I've got two little boys myself, so I understand. I understand that. Just to ask you a final question about the volume of aid. You talked about the 20 trucks, right? You called it a drop in the bucket, and that's a one-time delivery of 20 trucks as it stands right now. And you said it was 100 trucks a day going in there. How confident are you that, should you get what you want in terms of that there would be an opportunity to supply the volume of aid that is clearly going to be required inside Gaza?
Well, I'm confident. I mean, aid agencies have been, like Save the Children, we've been working in Gaza since 1953. Before this current crisis, 80% of the population of Gaza relied on international agencies like Save the Children to be able to exist. So we are ready to deliver this support. We're standing ready at the border with our trucks. Agencies like Save the Children, we're there, we're ready to go. But what we need is safety to be able to get in, both to deliver the aid, but also to make sure that our staff that are there, I mean, we've got many staff in Gaza, and I've been hearing from them, and they're terrified, they're homeless, they've had to flee their homes, they're out of support as well. And wherever they can, I'm also hearing reports of our staff running around when it's safe to do so, delivering the little water that we had that remains there to people most in need. And we need to be able to continue to cascade that and amplify that in the days ahead, or else it's going to become a real serious catastrophe. There's no other word to describe it.
Danny Glenwright, President and CEO of Save the Children Canada, I want to thank you for your time today.